In this final video, we will read some parts from Emily's letters and her poetry. First is the topic of poetry itself, answering the question, what is poetry and how does poetry make one feel? This is what Emily Dickinson had to say in a letter written to Dickinson. If I read a book and it makes my whole body so cold no fire ever can warm me, I know that is poetry. If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. These are the only way I know it. So she felt the force and the power of poetry, although she was not able to fully explain it. This happened not only with poetry, but with death and eternity. Let me show you what she said about death. Does not eternity appear dreadful to you? I often get thinking of it, and it seems so dark to me that I almost wish there was no eternity. To think that we must forever live and never cease to be. I don't know why it is, but it does not seem to me that I shall ever cease to live on earth. I cannot imagine with the farthest stretch of my imagination my own death scene. It does not seem to me that I shall ever close my eyes in death. So death was an idea that was unimaginable to Emily Dickinson. This is why she's so obsessed with this idea in many of her poems, some of which we will read. And in many of her poems, she also repeats literally the phrase that I just read, that she wishes there was no eternity, that none of us are going to die, and so on. For example, in one of her poetry, I Died for Beauty, the speaker is already dead, and the speaker speaks to another corpse from within her tomb. It kind of resembles Poe a bit, but it's quite optimistic, unlike Edgar Allan Poe. And there are lines in this poem, I Died for Beauty, which resemble John Keats. I told you in my first video that John Keats was one of the major influences on Emily Dickinson's poetry. More specifically, the poem that she alludes to is Ode on a Grecian Urn, and this line, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know. Let's just look at some examples from this poem. I died for beauty, she says, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb when one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room. The adjoining room is another tomb. So she died for beauty, he died for truth. And beauty and truth are one and the same, as John Keats tells us. Then they converse, they say why they died, and then she says, and so, as kinsmen met a night, we talked between the rooms until the moss had reached our lips and covered up our names. So the world outside their tombs is going to end because she mentions moss and the passing of time. She's also obsessed with the passing of time. But we do not get an answer whether they will live eternally within their tombs and whether they will going to speak about beauty and truth. Then another point to mention, which deals with a similar topic, is Because I Could Not Stop for Death. One of her most celebrated poems. She speaks here about death, of course. The speaker is already dead, I think, here, and she drives in the carriage driven by Death himself, but she, I think, never gets to her final destination. It's simply a drive with the Death. We never get to hear whether she reached heaven or hell, for that matter. This is what the poem says. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. Immortality here refers to eternity. This is why it's bolded here. And of course, it's capitalized. And she says in the first line that she could not stop for death. Remember from the letter that she says, I cannot even imagine the scene of my own death. This is actually what it says here. But eventually, death came to pick her up. Now she speaks about what they could see on their way to heaven. So they pass the school, they see some children, and so on. And let me read some other lines. Mhm. The Jews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then, 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. So she was in this stanza on the top. She was quivering. She was getting cold because she was wearing only a really thin dress. And then they reached a swelling of the ground, presumably her tomb, but she never says whether they entered the tomb or not. And she says in the last line that the eternity, as she imagines it, is actually pretty short. She says it feels shorter than that day that I finally realized I was dead. So again, she cannot reconcile with the idea that she has to die and that there is maybe an eternity. The famous critic Alan Tate said of this poem, if the word great means anything in poetry, this poem is one of the greatest in the English language. It is flawless to the last detail. And of course, there are many other things to say about it, but I will not really focus on that now. Then her poem, If You Were Coming in the Fall, is really interesting because again it speaks about eternity and about the fact that she's waiting for her lover. So in this poem, she says that she's used to waiting for him and she will wait him forever, which means eternity. Emily Dickinson uses a very interesting structure here that you can see in the slide. If, but, and now. And this is the structure I used to describe Andrew Marvell's poem To His Coy Mistress. I don't know whether you remember that poem. It's really nice. When the speaker wants to force, not force, but persuade, let's say, his girlfriend to have sex with him by using the motif carpe diem, and the poet describes this with the structure if, but, and now, because the poem is structurally divided into three distinct parts. Each part begins with one of these words. So now would be the most powerful word here. And Emily Dickinson's poem, If You Were Coming in the Fall, follows the same structure. What else do I have for you? I Never Saw a Moor is also a poem which contains musings on death and on God as well. And I have to read it as to be able to explain it. I never saw a moor, I never saw the sea, yet know I how the heather looks and what a billow be. A billow is a wave, and heather is like a moor, like kao vresište mi to prevodimo. So she says, although she never saw a moor or a sea, she has an idea in her mind what these two things look like. Then she moves on to say, I never spoke with God, nor visited in heaven, yet certain am I of the spot, as if the checks were given. Checks here refers to a map. So she says, even though I never saw God, and I never went to heaven, I know, I'm certain that God exists. And I know the exact place of heaven because I can feel it in my heart. It is as though I have a map of the heaven. This is the really, really nice expression of her faith and her belief in God, which is something completely different from agnosticism, for example. Okay, and finally, if even though Emily's poetry abounds with melancholy and sadness and uncertainty, unanswered questions, there is still hope in her verses. This is how she described hope in one of her poems. The poem consists of 3 stanzas. I will read only one, and it goes like this. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. So hope is metaphorically described as a bird that lives in our souls. And what's interesting here is that later on she will say, "This bird never asked a crumb of me." So hope is a feeling that never asks you for anything in return. And this is what makes this feeling so precious to us humans. And finally, and I will end this third part about Emily Dickinson, I'm reading one of my favorite poems. It's called "I'm Nobody." So let's hear it. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They'd advertise, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog, to tell one's name the livelong June to admiring bog. Bog is a marsh or a heather, dakle bog je neka močvara, tako da ovde ona kaže da je mnogo bolje u životu biti niko nego biti neko, a vi to onda sami protumačite. I evo završit ću samo citatom da ga ponovim kako biste ga možda zapamtili i razmišljali malo o tome. Ona kaže, saying nothing sometimes says the most. See you in class. Bye.